Welcome to your Dogcast, where we feature news just for dog lovers. Here's your Rover Reporter, Mary Lou Davidson.
Today we're going to talk about some basics about dog food. Usually, when we bring a dog home from a shelter or a breeder, we ask them what the dog's been fed so that we can continue that in hopes of easing the transition as the dog gets acclimated. But shortly after that, when they do feel at home, it's time to take a good look at what they're eating and really think about if it's the most healthy option for them. There's so many choices. Should it be dry, wet, a combo, or raw? Where do we start? It's overwhelming. So we brought in someone who knows a little something about dog food. He's the senior pet nutritionist at Dog Perfect. A warm welcome to Kyle Baker. So Kyle, let's get into it. What do you recommend?
Well, I always want to have a variety in a dog's diet. So, I'm always a fan of raw diets to canned food diets to then kibble. But I always recommend adding some kind of moisture to it into a wet food or a raw food form of some sort.
Could you add some table scraps, carrots, meats, those kinds of things?
You got it. Yeah, you can supplement with your own human food itself to make sure it's not seasoned. It's the same chicken, beef, pork that you eat is perfectly fine to feed towards them. Turkey, carrots, zucchini, squash, your watermelons, cantaloupes, all those are good additives to add to the diet, to add more moisture to it, and to add a little bit more flavor and good smells to the dog's diet.
Yeah. How about berries? Can they have berries?
Heck yeah.
Okay.
Heck yeah. Blueberries are amazing. Some dogs really love blueberries more than anything, and some dogs don't. But yes, blueberries, cranberries, strawberries, all that is wonderful for dogs to eat in a small portion. Just like for us, everything in small portions. You don't want to overwhelm them in just one thing. So don't just give them a whole bowl of blueberries or a whole bowl of strawberries. It's a few additions added to the kibble itself. Just look at it as more as supplemental feeding.
Gotcha. So, without getting into specific brand names, what kinds of things are we looking for on the dog food label?
So on a dry dog food label, you want to make sure that the first two ingredients are some kind of meat-based towards it, and then not a lot of other fillers afterwards. So I always tell people, when you look at a bag of dog food, 90% of the ingredients is before the fat. So if you look and find out where the fat is, and if there's only 4 or 5 ingredients in front of that, and 2 of them are proteins, then you know that food is going to be having more meat content than fillers. So always kind of pinpoint where the fat is on the label, and then just remember 90% of the food is before the fat. So if you just sit there and count all those ingredients, there's 8 ingredients in there. That means you can only have 15% of meat, 12% of this, and it just keeps on going down the line. So the less ingredients before the fat is always key, and then making sure it's led with 2 meat sources at the beginning.
So how do they label fat? Is it fat or is it?
So it'd be like chicken fat or beef fat, or sometimes they just do animal fat or soybean oil.
Gotcha.
They'll use it as. But most of the time it's labeled as a fat. Every so often it's labeled as some kind of vegetable oil, but mostly it's labeled as a fat itself.
What about the grain-free mystery? There was a big surge towards that, and then a pullback of late with some possible problems. Do you think that grain-free presents a problem?
Oh, not at all. That was more towards propaganda more than towards science itself, and that's why it got pulled back. There was an article written by a veterinarian from a really, really, really a big company in this industry, and she wrote an opinion article of why she maybe thought that heart issues could be coming about in dogs. And that opinion article took off like it was a fact and went all over social media, news, and took off. But actually, after the studies about that really got put together, there was no proof or indication that grain-free diets cause heart disease, or grains that or diets that have grain in it help stopping heart disease. There is no proof or no scientific on that's a possibility. But again, that was one of the worst things that ever happened in this industry. It made people question the foods they were eating. It started making them question the independent stores that they were shopping at, and all that that grain-free and grain thing. The only thing that helped was veterinarians, your publicly traded companies, and your corporate companies. But there is no scientific proof that you dogs need grain or that grain-free is causing any issues at all.
Yeah, really just a big brouhaha over nothing.
You got it.
So when we were talking about the label and having at least 4 or 5 ingredients before the fat, does that hold true for canned food as well?
It generally it is. So what I tell people to look on canned food is at the guaranteed analysis. So on the guaranteed analysis, it's going to have your protein and your fat content in it. And if your protein and fat are really close to each other, say your protein is 9 and your fat is 8, that means that canned food is pretty much almost half of it. It's just fat. Probably wouldn't be a good food to feed to a dog on an everyday basis. That's more of a topper, as like one or 2 scoops on there. So I always tell people, look at the guarantee analysis on the back of a canned food and look at the protein and fat. And you want to see a difference in that. If it's like 8 and 4, that means it's 25% fat, 75% meat. But yeah, if the protein and fat numbers are really close to each other, that pretty much means that they're cutting pretty much half fat in that can and half meat content and boiling it down. So just look at those guarantee analysis, the fat and protein, and make sure there is a large difference between them. And that's only important if you're only feeding canned food. If you're just using it as a topper or a flavor enhancer, then the protein, then the ones that are protein and fats are close to each other really don't matter. But if you're just feeding canned food, you definitely want to pay attention to that, or you'll get an overweight dog or a dog with pancreatitis, or you'll get the soft stools.
Yeah. What about, as our dogs age, should seniors get the same amount of protein, a little less, a little more? How does that work?
My belief is dogs need to still get more protein when they're older. It's the same thing as when we get older. We need good, clean, easy digestible proteins to deter atrophy, and it's the same thing with dogs. But the main thing is a lot of these dog food companies derive their protein from vegetable and plant matter, and you're not getting those amino acids that actually help keep your muscles strong. So it's really depends on where that protein is coming from. If it's coming from meat content, then the more the better. If it's coming from vegetable content, no, it's you're not getting the amino acids that you need from it, and it's just hurting your liver and kidneys trying to extract that protein from that vegetable and plant matter. So if the answer is yes, if it's coming from a good meat protein source. No, if it's coming mostly from a vegetable protein source.
Okay. So we've talked about dry food. We've talked about wet food. Years ago, I looked into the raw possibility, and at that point, it was really cumbersome and, all kinds of food safety issues. But now there are prepackaged raw foods. What do you think about those?
So that is my favorite way to feed a dog or a cat. They say that's the most biologically appropriate way because it's the easiest way for a dog to recognize food is in a raw form, and the safety measures in the raw industry has will blow people's mind on the safety that they put into the dog industry. So they allow 0% salmonella, E. coli, and listeria in the raw dog food industry. Our grocery stores are allowed 14% salmonella, E. coli, and listeria in the food that is in our grocery store. So the dog food industry, raw industry, is actually highly regulated more highly than our grocery store food itself. And the ways they've gotten around that to make it 100% safe is some companies do HPP, which is a high pressure pasteurization, which kills all the bad bacteria. There's a company out there who does fermentation. Fermentation kills all the bad bacteria and boosts all the good bacteria. And then you have a few companies out there that's gently cooking or slow steaming their food at 185 degrees to eliminate also that bacteria out there. So they have made raw safe. And it is by far the easiest way, easiest food to digest, and the most nutritional for a dog and a cat to take in.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I've got a whole bunch of questions about supplements, but I'm going to save those for our next talk. But this has been really helpful, and I so appreciate your time, Kyle.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Kyle Baker is the senior pet food nutritionist at dogperfect.com.